I watched him smile as he pocketed my $80,000 bonus, and 3 weeks later, I handed him a pen and watched him sign the document that ended his career. He thought it was a promotion. He was dead wrong. That morning in the conference room, as sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling West Partners, Ethan Cole had no idea he was signing his own termination. The same hands that had stolen my work were now sealing his fate, and I savored every second of his oblivious confidence. My name is Rachel Warren, and I've spent 5 years building my reputation as one of the most meticulous financial analysts at Sterling West Partners. That Tuesday morning started like any other black coffee. Bloomberg terminal already glowing, 3 monitors displaying cascading data streams. Then the email arrived at 9:17 a.m. Subject line, Q3 Performance Bonus Allocation. My heart rate spiked as I clicked. The restructuring project for Meridian Retail Group, my project, the one that had consumed 300 hours of my life over the past quarter, was listed right there. Project lead Ethan Cole, performance bonus $80,000. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my sent folder, pulling up the dozens of emails containing my analysis, my models, my strategic recommendations. Every single one had been sent to Ethan for final review. The timestamp on the official project submission to the board, 2 hours after I'd sent him my completed work. His name was the only one on it. The coffee mug slipped from my grip, brown liquid spreading across my desk like the rage spreading through my chest. As I grabbed paper towels, fragments of the past months crystallized with nauseating clarity. Just need to polish the language a bit, Rachel. The board prefers a certain presentation style. You're brilliant with numbers, but I can help with the politics. I'd been so focused on the work itself, the elegant solution that would save Meridian $23 million annually, that I'd missed the con happening right in front of me. While I was running sensitivity analyses at 2 a.m., Ethan was having drinks with Martin Graves, our CEO, while I was building complex financial models. He was building relationships with the people who decided who got credit. The Meridian project hadn't been just another assignment. It was supposed to be my breakthrough, my ticket to senior analyst. I'd identified inefficiencies no one else had seen, developed a restructuring strategy that balanced aggressive cost-cutting with sustainable growth. The implementation roadmap alone had taken 3 weeks to perfect. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Hey Rachel, saw the bonus announcement. Drinks on me tonight to celebrate the team effort. Team effort. The words made my stomach turn. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. 35 years old. Dark circles under my eyes from countless late nights, while Ethan Cole, who couldn't build a DCF model if his life depended on it, was about to cash my check. The same Ethan who'd joined the company 8 months ago, fresh from his MBA, full of buzzwords and empty promises. But this time was different. This time, the fury didn't dissolve into resignation like it had so many times before when I'd watched mediocre men take credit for exceptional women's work. This time, it crystallized into something harder, sharper, a plan. I walked back to my desk, opened a new spreadsheet, and typed a single word in cell A1, revenge. Because Ethan Cole had made a fatal error. He'd stolen from someone who understood numbers, systems, and most importantly, someone who knew that the best trap is one that lets the prey walk in willingly, thinking they found treasure. The next email that popped up was about a new project, Summit Ridge Energy, a potential $10 million consulting contract. Martin wanted our recommendations by month's end. I smiled for the first time that morning. Perfect timing. I began laying the groundwork immediately, creating 2 separate folders in our shared drive. My fingers moved with newfound purpose across the keyboard. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about precision, about patience, about letting Ethan's own greed become the rope he'd hang himself with. Ethan Cole was the kind of man who wore his Stanford MBA like a Rolex, constantly visible, unnecessarily prominent, 32 years old, 6 feet tall, with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd arrived at Sterling West Partners 8 months ago, introduced as a strategic acquisition by Martin Graves himself. Within weeks, he'd inserted himself into every high-visibility project without contributing a single original idea. I started documenting everything after the Meridian theft, every interaction, every request, every small manipulation. The pattern was sickeningly consistent. He'd schedule alignment meetings at 4:30 p.m., right when most analysts were deep in their work. He'd ask for quick favors. Could you just run these numbers? Could you validate this assumption? Could you clean up this model, always with that disarming charm, always with the promise of shared credit that never materialized? Sarah from the tech sector team had warned me 3 months ago. "Watch out for Ethan," she'd said over lunch, voice lowered. He did the same thing to Marcus, took his entire blockchain feasibility study, presented it to the board as his own innovation. Marcus had quit 2 weeks later. Sarah herself transferred to the Seattle office shortly after. But knowing Ethan's game wasn't enough. I needed to understand his weaknesses. So I observed. I listened. I learned. His first weakness: vanity. Ethan couldn't resist being seen as the smartest person in the room. He'd interrupt presentations to add unnecessary complexity, throw around jargon he'd memorized but didn't understand. "We need to leverage our synergies for maximum delta," he'd say, while the actual experts exchanged knowing glances. His second weakness: laziness disguised as delegation. Ethan had never built a financial model from scratch. He couldn't read a cash flow statement without a cheat sheet. His strategic insights were recycled McKinsey articles and Harvard Business Review abstracts. He survived by being a parasite, attaching himself to competent people and draining their expertise. His third and fatal weakness: greed coupled with overconfidence. Ethan genuinely believed he was untouchable. Martin Graves had taken him under his wing, invited him to private dinners, included him in executive strategy sessions. That protection had made him reckless. I discovered the full extent of his operation when I accessed the shared drive's revision history. Over the past 8 months, Ethan had systematically claimed credit for 7 major projects: Jennifer's competitive analysis for the Peterson account, David's risk assessment framework, Anna's market penetration strategy. Each time, the pattern was identical: request the file for review, make cosmetic changes, submit under his name. The revision logs told the story. Original file created by Jennifer Martinez at 11:43 p.m. Last modified by Ethan Cole at 8:15 a.m. The next morning changing fonts, adding his name to the header, inserting buzzwords that added nothing but confusion. What made it worse was the company culture that enabled him. Sterling West Partners prided itself on being a meritocracy, but merit was measured by visibility, not value. The people who spent their evenings perfecting analyses were invisible. The people who presented those analyses in morning meetings became stars. I found Ethan's performance reviews in the HR system. He'd carelessly left them in a shared folder. Exceptional leadership presence, Martin had written, natural strategic thinker, future partner material. Meanwhile, my own review, despite my quantifiably superior output, read solid technical skills, could benefit from increased executive visibility. The Summit Ridge Energy project would change everything. It was too big, too complex for Ethan to fumble his way through. The client was notorious for their detailed scrutiny, their intolerance for anything less than perfection. They'd torn apart 3 competing firms' proposals already. I began constructing my trap with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Every piece had to fit perfectly. Every document had to serve dual purposes. The real analysis would be bulletproof. My reputation depended on it. But the decoy versions, the ones I'd ensure Ethan would steal, would be something special. They'd look flawless on the surface, impressive enough to fool anyone in a cursory review, but underneath, they'd be riddled with sophisticated errors that would only reveal themselves under pressure. The beauty was that Ethan's own ignorance would be his downfall. He wouldn't know enough to spot the mistakes. He'd present my poisoned work with the same unearned confidence he'd always shown. And when it all came crashing down, there would be no one else to blame. The Summit Ridge Energy project demanded a comprehensive analysis of their renewable portfolio optimization, my specialty. I spent 2 weeks crafting the legitimate version. Every calculation triple-checked, every projection defensible. The strategy would increase their ROI by 37% over 5 years. It was some of my best work. But the decoy that was my masterpiece, I created a parallel universe of data, seductive in its promises, but catastrophic in its execution. The cash flow projections showed 48% returns, just believable enough to excite but impossible to achieve. I reversed the correlation between oil prices and renewable adoption rates, making it appear that rising fossil fuel costs would somehow decrease demand for alternatives. The error was buried in formula references across 17 linked sheets, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The most elegant trap was in the risk assessment matrix. I inverted the probability calculations using a complex nested function that looked sophisticated but essentially guaranteed that high-risk scenarios would be labeled as low risk. Any executive who implemented this strategy would be committing corporate suicide. I saved both versions in our shared drive at 11:23 p.m. on a Thursday. The real version went into a subfolder labeled Working Drafts Do Not Use. The poisoned version sat in the main project folder, tagged Final Ready for Review. Then I enabled detailed audit logging on both files, a feature most people didn't know existed. Every access, every download, every modification would be permanently recorded with timestamps and user IDs. To ensure Ethan would bite, I sent him a carefully crafted email at 7:45 a.m. Friday morning. Ethan, I'm swamped with the Morrison account. The Summit Ridge analysis is in the shared folder, but it needs senior review before the client meeting. The projections might be too aggressive, would value your strategic perspective. The phrasing was deliberate. Too aggressive would trigger his ego. He'd want to be the one to present bold numbers. Senior review would make him feel important. Strategic perspective was the kind of empty flattery he couldn't resist. I watched the access logs from my phone during my morning coffee. 8:12 a.m., Ethan Cole accessed Final Ready for Review. 8:13 a.m., file downloaded. 8:37 a.m., file uploaded to his personal folder with a new name, EC Summit Ridge Strategic Analysis Final. He'd even had the audacity to add his initials. Over the next week, I fed him supplementary materials, each with carefully orchestrated flaws. A competitive analysis that misidentified Summit Ridge's main rival's market position, a regulatory compliance checklist that omitted two critical new EPA requirements, a technology adoption timeline that was off by 18 months. But I also did something else. I created a hidden backup system, storing the real versions with blockchain-verified timestamps on my personal encrypted drive. I documented every email exchange, every meeting where Ethan presented my work, every instance where he claimed authorship. I used screen recording software to capture him accessing the files, downloaded the metadata that proved I was the original creator. The metadata was particularly damning. Every Excel file contains hidden information: author name, creation date, total editing time. Ethan never bothered to check. The decoy files showed hundreds of hours of editing time under my user ID, then minutes under his. Even if he claimed we were collaborating, the data told a different story. I also planted a digital signature in the files, a pattern of specific formatting choices and formula structures that were unique to my work, like a painter's brushstroke. I'd use the same signature across 5 years of projects. Any forensic analyst would be able to match them to my previous work. 3 days before the Summit Ridge presentation, Ethan strutted into the break room where I was eating lunch. Rachel, fantastic work on that initial Summit Ridge framework. I've enhanced it significantly. The client's going to be blown away by the numbers we're showing. I asked innocently. Well, the team effort, of course, though Martin specifically asked me to lead the presentation given the strategic implications. He was already rewriting history, genuinely believing his own fiction. Of course, I replied, taking a slow sip of coffee. I'm sure you've verified all the regulatory compliance issues. Summit Ridge is particularly sensitive after their last EPA fine. His slight hesitation told me everything. Naturally, everything's been thoroughly reviewed. He hadn't even read the full document. He'd skimmed the executive summary, memorized the headline numbers, and assumed the rest was solid. After all, my work always had been before. The presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. Tuesday. By Monday night, Ethan had fully committed. He'd sent the poisoned analysis to Martin for pre-read, copying the entire executive team. He'd created a PowerPoint deck highlighting the 48% returns. He'd even sent a cocky email to the Summit Ridge team about the game-changing insights he'd be presenting. The trap was set. The prey had taken the bait. All that remained was to spring it shut. Monday morning, 9:15 a.m. Ethan appeared at my desk with that practiced smile, leather portfolio in hand. "Rachel, I need access to the supporting data files for Summit Ridge, the detailed calculation sheets, the raw data sources, everything." I looked up from my screen, feigning mild concern. "Everything that's extensive. The calculation sheets alone are over 40 tabs. The client might ask granular questions. I need to be prepared." His tone carried that familiar edge of entitlement dressed as leadership. Of course, I turned to my computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Though I should mention, those files are still in draft form. I've been refining the calculations, and some of the formulas are... "Rachel," he cut me off with a patronizing chuckle. "I've been doing this long enough to handle draft calculations. Just send me what you have." Perfect. He just admitted, in front of 3 other analysts who were pretending not to listen, that he knew the files weren't final. I pulled up the shared drive, making sure my screen was visible to the nearby security camera. "I'll grant you access to the full project folder, but Ethan, these files have my preliminary work. The assumptions need to be validated, especially the renewable adoption curves and the yi." "Just send them." His smile tightened. "I'll handle the validation." I clicked through the folders slowly, deliberately. The main calculations are in Summit Analysis Master Draft. The supporting data is in the subfolder labeled Preliminary Do Not Distribute. "Are you sure you want the preliminary versions?" "Yes. Rachel, send them now." His impatience was showing. Martin had probably asked him for backup documentation. I shared the folders at 9:28 a.m., making sure to send a follow-up email with explicit warnings about the draft status. The subject line read, "Draft Summit Ridge files require validation before use." The email body was carefully worded, "Ethan, as requested. I'm providing access to my preliminary Summit Ridge calculations. Please note, these are working drafts containing unvalidated assumptions. Specifically, the risk matrices in tabs 15 to 23 use experimental modeling that hasn't been stress tested. The regulatory compliance section is based on 2023 guidelines and needs updating. I strongly recommend we review these together before any client presentation." He replied within 30 seconds. "Received. I'll take it from here." I watched the access logs light up like a Christmas tree. 9:31 a.m. Ethan accessed Summit Analysis Master Draft. 9:32 a.m. Download initiated. 9:45 a.m. File uploaded to his personal folder, renamed EC Summit Final Approved. He just changed draft to final and preliminary to approved without opening a single calculation tab. I opened our internal chat system and messaged Jennifer Martinez. "Quick question. Did Ethan ever respond to your offer to help with the Summit Ridge regulatory section?" Her response was immediate. "He said he had it covered. Why?" "Just checking. He seemed stressed about the presentation." "When isn't he stressed before taking credit for someone else's work?" I screenshotted the conversation, another piece of evidence. At lunch, I sat with David from Risk Management. Casually, I mentioned, "Ethan asked for my Summit Ridge files this morning, the draft ones with all those experimental calculations." David nearly choked on his sandwich. "The ones you said could show anything from 30 to 60% returns depending on one variable." "Those exact ones. He said he'd validate them himself." "Ethan couldn't validate a parking ticket. Does he even know what a Monte Carlo simulation is?" "He told Martin they were using advanced stochastic modeling yesterday." David laughed. "That's like saying you're using advanced word processing to write an email." 2 more witnesses to Ethan's incompetence. At 3:47 p.m., Ethan sent a group email to the entire Strategic Consulting Division team, excited to share that tomorrow's Summit Ridge presentation will showcase our most innovative analysis to date. The projections we'll be presenting represent a breakthrough in renewable portfolio optimization, thanks to all who contributed to this effort. All who contributed. Not a single name mentioned. I forwarded the email to my personal account, then spent the rest of the afternoon creating one final document, the real Summit Ridge analysis. Perfected and polished, every number verified, every assumption defended, every regulation current. I saved it with a timestamp certificate and uploaded it to my personal encrypted cloud at 5:53 p.m. That evening, Ethan posted on LinkedIn, preparing to present game-changing renewable energy strategies to Summit Ridge Energy tomorrow. Proud to lead such innovative work at Sterling West Partners. 143 likes, 27 comments congratulating him. Martin Graves himself commented, "This is why we brought you aboard, Ethan. Excellence in action." I smiled as I closed my laptop. Tomorrow, Ethan would walk into that conference room holding my poisoned chalice, ready to drink deeply from it in front of everyone who mattered. He'd claim ownership of every number, every projection, every strategic recommendation. And I'd let him. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Pathetic fallacy at its finest. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., earlier than usual, and positioned myself perfectly close enough to observe, but far enough to avoid suspicion. The Summit Ridge team was scheduled to arrive at 1:30 p.m. for the 2 p.m. presentation. Ethan strutted in at 9 a.m., wearing his most expensive suit, the navy Armani he saved for power moments. He spent the morning in his office, door closed, presumably memorizing the numbers he didn't understand. I knew because I could see him through the glass partition, flipping through printed slides, lips moving as he rehearsed. At 11 a.m., he emerged for a victory lap around the office. "Big day, team. Summit Ridge is going to be a game changer for Sterling West." Jennifer passed my desk and whispered, "He's acting like he's already won the account." "Confidence is key," I replied neutrally, continuing to type. What Ethan didn't know was that I'd spent the previous evening researching the Summit Ridge executives who'd be attending. Their CFO, Patricia Huang, had published 3 papers on risk assessment in renewable portfolios. She'd specifically criticized aggressive projections that ignored regulatory variables. Their head of strategy, Marcus Thompson, had tweeted last month about consultants who promise the moon but deliver space dust. These were people who would smell bullshit from a mile away. At 12:45 p.m., I sent Ethan one final email. "Good luck with the presentation. Remember the risk matrices and tabs. 15 to 23 need explanation. The assumptions are unconventional. Also, Patricia Huang tends to drill down on regulatory compliance. The 2023 guidelines we used are outdated." He didn't reply. He was already in the executive conference room, setting up his presentation, checking the projector, arranging materials with the precision of someone who'd never had to worry about the actual content. I watched him through the glass walls as he reviewed his slides one more time. He'd added animations, graphics, his photo on the intro slide. Strategic analysis by Ethan Cole, senior consultant, not by Sterling West Partners, not by the strategic consulting team, by Ethan Cole. The Summit Ridge executives arrived at 1:28 p.m. Patricia Huang, Marcus Thompson, and their CEO, James Morrison, a man who'd built his company from nothing and had zero tolerance for empty suits. Martin Graves greeted them personally, escorting them to the conference room. "You're going to be impressed with what Ethan's prepared, some of the most innovative thinking we've produced." I positioned myself at a desk with a clear view, opening a spreadsheet to look busy. Several other analysts found reasons to work nearby. Everyone knew this was a make-or-break presentation. 2 p.m. sharp. Ethan began with smooth confidence, clicking through his opening slides. Summit Ridge Energy stands at an inflection point. Our analysis shows potential returns of 48% over 5 years. Patricia Huang's eyebrow went up slightly. She made a note. Ethan continued, building momentum. Using advanced stochastic modeling and proprietary algorithms, we've identified optimization opportunities that your competitors haven't even imagined. Marcus Thompson leaned forward. 48% seems aggressive. What are your base assumptions? Conservative, actually, Ethan replied without hesitation. We've modeled for oil prices remaining stable while renewable adoption accelerates. I saw Patricia and Marcus exchange a glance. Anyone who knew the energy sector understood that stable oil prices typically slow renewable adoption, not accelerate it, but Ethan pressed on, oblivious. He reached the risk assessment section at 2:23 p.m. As you can see, we've classified regulatory changes as low risk, with only a 2% probability of impacting returns. Patricia Huang interrupted. 2%. The EPA is reviewing new standards next quarter. How did you factor that in? Ethan's hand hesitated over the slide clicker. We used the most current available guidelines. Which version? She pressed. The 2023 Comprehensive Framework. Those were superseded 6 months ago, Marcus Thompson said flatly. The new standards could affect 30% of the portfolio you're analyzing. The blood drained from Ethan's face, but he tried to recover. Of course, we can adjust for the new standards. The fundamental strategy remains sound. James Morrison, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Show me the calculation sheet for slide 17, the one showing the correlation between oil prices and renewable adoption. Ethan clicked frantically, pulling up the Excel file. The formula bar displayed my reversed correlation formula in all its complex glory. This formula, Morrison said slowly, appears to show an inverse relationship. Are you seriously suggesting that higher oil prices decrease demand for renewables? The room went silent. Ethan stared at the screen, seeing the formula for the first time, trying to decipher mathematics he didn't understand. There might be a display error. Let me... Mr. Cole, Patricia Huang interrupted, her voice arctic. Did you build this model yourself? Ethan's mouth opened and closed. The pause stretched too long. Because, she continued, anyone who actually built this would immediately recognize that the correlation coefficient is reversed. It's a fundamental error that invalidates every subsequent projection. Martin Graves stood up, his face flushed. Ethan, perhaps we should take a brief break to review. No need, James Morrison said, closing his portfolio. We've seen enough. But Ethan, in his desperation, made one final catastrophic mistake. The analysis was prepared by our team. If there are errors, it's a collective oversight. I'll need to review with our analysts. Your team, Marcus Thompson pulled out his phone. Interesting, because your LinkedIn post yesterday claimed this was your innovative work, your breakthrough. Which is it? The Summit Ridge executive stood to leave. Morrison paused at the door. Turning to Martin. We came here expecting strategic expertise, not amateur hour, and certainly not from someone who can't even explain their own supposed work. They left at 2:41 p.m. The conference room was silent except for the hum of the still-running projector, displaying Ethan's name in 40-point font. The conference room remained frozen for 30 seconds after Summit Ridge left. Martin Graves stood at the head of the table, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of his chair. Ethan was still at the podium, laptop open, the damning formula visible on the screen behind him. My office, Martin said quietly. Now. Ethan started to close his laptop, but Martin snapped. Leave everything exactly as it is. Rachel, I need you in my office as well. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. This wasn't part of the plan, not yet. I was supposed to wait, let Ethan dig himself deeper trying to explain. But Martin was 3 steps ahead, as always. In Martin's corner office, Ethan immediately went on the offensive. The model had flaws, yes, but the underlying strategy is sound. Rachel's calculations need better quality control. Stop, Martin's voice cut through the air. He turned to me. Rachel, did you build the Summit Ridge model? I built a model, yes. Several versions, actually. Several versions. Martin's eyes narrowed. I pulled out my laptop, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I created a comprehensive analysis for Summit Ridge, but I also had concerns about data security and intellectual property protection, so I maintained multiple drafts. I opened my email and showed him the thread. Yesterday at 9:15 a.m., Ethan requested access to all Summit Ridge files. I explicitly told him they were drafts requiring validation. Here's his response saying he'd handle it himself. Ethan interjected. Standard collaboration. Rachel's trying to cover for her errors. The errors were intentional, I said calmly. Both men turned to stare at me. Excuse me? Martin's voice was dangerously quiet. I pulled up my real analysis, the one I'd perfected and timestamped. This is the actual Summit Ridge strategy. 37% returns, fully compliant with 2024 EPA regulations, all calculations verified. I clicked through the slides clean. professional, bulletproof. And this, I switched files, is what Ethan presented, a version I deliberately seeded with errors to protect our intellectual property. "You sabotaged the presentation," Ethan practically shrieked. No, I protected my work with a watermark of sorts, like how software companies include intentional bugs in beta versions to track unauthorized distribution. I turned to Martin. I never intended for anyone to present the flawed version. It was clearly marked as draft, stored in a folder labeled "Do Not Distribute," with explicit warnings about validation requirements. Martin was silent, processing. Then, "Show me the file access logs." I pulled up the audit trail, the digital breadcrumbs Ethan had left everywhere. 9:31 a.m. yesterday, Ethan accessed the draft file. 9:32. He downloaded it. 9:45. He uploaded it to his personal folder and renamed it from draft to final approved. He never opened the calculation tabs, never validated anything. The metadata shows 0 editing time under his user ID. "This is ridiculous," Ethan sputtered. "She's trying to frame me." "Then explain the formula," Martin said coldly. "The one Patricia Huang asked about. Explain to me, right now, what that correlation coefficient means." Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I pulled up another document. "Would you like me to explain it? Or would you prefer to see the 7 other projects where similar patterns occurred?" I displayed a summary sheet. The Meridian restructuring my 300 hours of work submitted under Ethan's name, Jennifer's competitive analysis for Peterson, David's risk framework, Anna's market penetration strategy. "You can't prove—" "I can—" I opened folder after folder. Revision histories, timestamp certificates, email threads, even security camera footage of my badge accessing the building at 2 a.m. while working on Meridian, compared to Ethan's badge history showing he never worked past 6 p.m. during that entire project period. Martin walked to his window, looking out at the Denver skyline. "Ethan, did you create any original analysis for Summit Ridge?" I provided strategic oversight. "Yes or no? Did you create any original analysis?" The silence stretched until it became an answer itself. Martin turned around. "Rachel, do you have the correct version ready for presentation?" "Yes, I can have Patricia Huang back here tomorrow if needed." "Do it." He looked at Ethan with disgust. "You're suspended pending a full investigation. I want your laptop, your access badges, and your company phone on my desk within the hour." "Martin, this is a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Martin said, his voice like ice, "was mine when I thought you were executive material. Get out of my office." Ethan stood, his face cycling through rage, disbelief, and finally, fear. He looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood every email, every file access, every piece of evidence had been deliberately placed. He'd walked into a trap so meticulously constructed he never saw the walls. As he reached the door, Martin added, "Legal will be in touch about recovering the $80,000 bonus from the Meridian project, the one you stole." The door closed behind Ethan at 3:18 p.m. Martin turned to me. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the morning I saw his name on my bonus allocation. And if Summit Ridge hadn't called him out, if they'd accepted the flawed analysis." I pulled up one final email, dated that morning at 6 a.m., addressed to Patricia Huang directly. Not sent, but ready. I would never have let flawed work reach a client under our firm's name. I had a contingency plan. Martin studied me for a long moment. "The Summit Ridge presentation is yours. Don't disappoint me." As I left his office, I passed Ethan's desk. He was throwing his belongings into a box while security watched. His Stanford MBA diploma fell off the wall, the glass cracking as it hit the floor. I didn't smile, not yet. There was still one more piece to play. Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. The Summit Ridge team was back in our conference room, but the atmosphere was completely different. Patricia Huang actually smiled when she saw me at the presentation podium instead of Ethan. "Ms. Warren," she said, extending her hand. "Martin mentioned you had something to show us." I connected my laptop, pulled up the real analysis, my analysis. "What you saw yesterday was a security measure gone wrong. This is the actual strategic proposal for Summit Ridge Energy. The first slide appeared clean, professional, honest. 37% returns over 5 years, with full regulatory compliance and built-in risk mitigation. Marcus Thompson leaned forward. That's 11% less than yesterday's fiction. It's also achievable, I replied. Every projection is based on verified data, current regulations, and conservative assumptions. I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver than sell you a fantasy. For the next hour, I walked them through every detail. The real correlation between oil prices and renewable adoption. The actual regulatory landscape with contingencies for upcoming EPA changes. The genuine risks and how to mitigate them. When Patricia asked about specific calculations, I didn't just show them. I explained the methodology, the reasoning, the alternatives I'd considered and rejected. This formula here, I pointed to the screen, accounts for the non-linear relationship between government subsidies and adoption rates. It's complex, but it's accurate. I can walk you through the derivation if you'd like. Please do, Patricia said, and I could see the test in her eyes. I grabbed a marker and filled the whiteboard with equations, explaining each step, each variable, each assumption. No hesitation, no fumbling. This was my work, my expertise, my passion. James Morrison, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. Why weren't you presenting yesterday? Martin, who'd been observing from the corner, started to answer, but Morrison held up his hand. I'd like to hear from Ms. Warren. I set down the marker and faced them directly. Because I've spent 5 years being the analyst behind the curtain while others took the bow. Yesterday was supposed to be no different, except this time I protected my work. What Ethan presented was a deliberately flawed version I created to prevent exactly what he attempted: intellectual property theft. You knew he would steal it. He'd done it before, multiple times. The Meridian project that saved $23 million, my work, his bonus, Jennifer Martinez's competitive analysis, David Chen's risk framework, all presented under his name. Patricia and Marcus exchanged glances. Morrison pulled out his phone, typed something, then looked up. The Meridian restructuring. We heard about that. Industry groundbreaking work. You're saying that was yours? I pulled up my portfolio, showing the original files, the development process, the hundreds of hours logged, every model, every strategy, every line of code. And yet, Ethan Cole's name was on the final report. It was just like his name was on yesterday's disaster. I let that sink in. The difference is, yesterday I made sure there would be consequences. Morrison stood up, walked to the window, then turned back. Ms. Warren, what you've shown us today is exactly what Summit Ridge needs, but I need to know, can we trust Sterling West Partners? Can we trust that the people actually doing the work are the ones we'll be working with? Martin stepped forward. Ethan Cole no longer works for this firm. Rachel will be your primary contact, with full project ownership. And her title? Patricia asked pointedly. Martin hesitated for a fraction of a second. Senior Strategic Consultant. Not good enough, Morrison said flatly. If Ms. Warren is leading our engagement, she needs the authority to match. We don't work with analysts pretending to be executives or executives pretending to be analysts. The room went quiet. This was beyond the Summit Ridge project now. This was about Sterling West's entire culture. Martin looked at me, then back at Morrison. What would you suggest? Director of Strategic Analytics, minimum, with a direct report to you, not through another layer of management that can claim credit for her work. Patricia added, and we wanted in writing that Rachel Warren is our point of contact. All communications, all presentations, all strategic decisions go through her. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my heart was racing. They weren't just buying my analysis, they were demanding my recognition. Martin nodded slowly. Done. Rachel, the Summit Ridge account is yours. We'll discuss your new position after this meeting. The rest of the presentation flowed seamlessly. Every question had an answer. Every concern had a solution. Every number had support. By 11 a.m., we were discussing implementation timelines. By noon, Morrison was ready to sign. One more thing, Morrison said as we wrapped up. That young man yesterday, Ethan, he's finished at Sterling West. But what's to stop him from failing upwards somewhere else, from stealing someone else's work? I pulled out my phone and showed him a LinkedIn post I'd drafted but not published. It was a detailed case study of the Summit Ridge project, tagged with Sterling West Partners, showcasing the real analysis with my name prominently displayed. Every major insight, every innovation, every calculation publicly attributed to its actual creator. The business world is smaller than people think, I said. Reputation follows you. Morrison smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Ms. Warren, I think this is the beginning of an excellent partnership. As they left, Patricia Huang pulled me aside. That trap you set brilliant, but next time, don't wait so long to spring it. Your talent shouldn't be hidden behind mediocre men. After they were gone, Martin asked me to stay. The director position, you've earned it, but I need to know something. How many other Ethans are there in this company? I thought about the list I'd been compiling, the patterns I'd observed. Would you like the short answer or the detailed report? Christ, he rubbed his temples. The detailed report, on my desk by Friday. As I walked back to my desk, my soon-to-be former desk, I passed the empty office that had been Ethan's. His nameplate was already gone, his diplomas removed, his existence erased from Sterling West Partners as thoroughly as he'd tried to erase mine from my own work. 3 weeks later, 4:15 p.m., on a Thursday, I was in my new office corner view, 17th floor, Director of Strategic Analytics etched on the glass door. The Meridian bonus had been returned to me with interest, and Summit Ridge had signed a 3-year contract worth $12 million. My assistant knocked. Rachel, there's an Ethan Cole here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. I looked up from the Burton Industries proposal I was reviewing. Through my glass wall, I could see him in the waiting area, suit wrinkled, hair uncombed, the polished veneer completely stripped away. Send him in. He entered my office like a beaten dog. Nothing left of the swagger that once defined him. Rachel, I need your help. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, but said nothing. Sterling West is blocking my references. I can't get interviews anywhere. Martin Graves personally called 3 firms to warn them about me. My reputation is, he swallowed hard, destroyed. And I need this to stop. I need a chance to rebuild. I opened my drawer and pulled out a single document, sliding it across the mahogany desk. Read this. His hands shook slightly as he picked it up. As his eyes scanned the page, his face went from desperate hope to complete confusion. This is a consulting agreement for Sterling West. Read the terms carefully. He continued reading, his confusion deepening. Independent contractor position. Reporting to Director of Strategic Analytics. All work subject to verification and attribution review. Mandatory training on intellectual property and professional ethics. Keep reading. Probationary period of 12 months. Base compensation of... His eyes widened. This is 40% less than my previous salary. It's 20% more than an entry-level analyst, which, given your actual skill level, is generous. He looked up at me, understanding finally dawning. You want me to work for you, under you. I want you to work honestly, for the first time in your career. I leaned back in my chair. Every piece of work you submit will be reviewed. Every claim you make will be verified. Every presentation you give will be monitored. You'll learn to actually do the job you've been pretending to do for years. This is humiliation. This is redemption. I stood, walking to the window. Martin wanted to destroy you completely. Legal wanted to pursue criminal charges for corporate theft. I convinced them that public humiliation and industry blacklisting were sufficient punishment. So this is what mercy. This is your only option. I turned to face him. Sign it. Work under me for a year. Actually learn the job, and you might salvage something of a career. Or don't sign it and try your luck in a market where every major firm knows you as the man who presented fraudulent analysis to Summit Ridge Energy. He stared at the contract, pen in hand. I could see him wrestling with his pride, his ego crumbling in real time. Everyone will know I'm working below you. The person whose work you stole? Yes, everyone will know. His hand hovered over the signature line. And if I prove myself after the 12 months, then you'll have 1 year of honest work to show future employers. 1 year of actual experience instead of stolen achievements. At 4:33 p.m., Ethan Cole signed the document that ended his career as he knew it. The same hand that had signed my work as his own now signed his own professional surrender. He thought he was signing an employment contract. He was really signing his confession. "Report to Jennifer Martinez on Monday," I said, taking the contract. "She'll be your direct supervisor. You might remember her. She's the analyst whose competitive analysis you stole 6 months ago. She specifically requested to oversee your training." The color drained from his face. "Jennifer, she's also been promoted. Senior Manager of Quality Assurance. Funny how people flourish when their work isn't being stolen." He stood to leave, defeated, diminished. At the door, he turned back. "You planned this too, didn't you, this exact ending?" "No, Ethan, I planned for you to be fired and forgotten. This," I gestured to the contract, "is Martin's idea of corporate justice. He thinks everyone deserves a second chance, even parasites. Personally, I would have let you rot in unemployment." "Then why agree to it?" "Because watching you actually work for the first time in your life, watching you report to everyone you stepped on, that's better than any revenge I could have planned." He left without another word. Through my window, I watched him exit the building into the Denver afternoon, shoulders slumped, his reflection in the glass doors showing a man who'd just signed away his pride for a chance at redemption. I returned to my desk, to the Burton Industries proposal, to the work that had always been mine, but was now, finally, recognized as such. On my wall hung my new diploma from the executive education program Sterling West had enrolled me in. Right next to a framed email, the one from Patricia Huang of Summit Ridge that read, "Rachel, your analysis exceeded every expectation. Sterling West is lucky to have someone of your caliber. We look forward to many more years of partnership with you specifically." The autumn sun painted the mountains gold through my window. Somewhere in the building below, Jennifer Martinez was preparing training materials for her new subordinate. Somewhere else, David and Anna were leading their own projects, their names finally on their work. And somewhere out there, in every corporation in America, there were other Rachels, building kingdoms for thieves to claim. But perhaps, after word spread about Ethan Cole's spectacular fall, a few more thieves might think twice before stealing. A few more Rachels might stand up and say, "That's my work." I pulled up my LinkedIn and published the Summit Ridge case study I'd shown Morrison. Within an hour, it had 300 views and dozens of comments from analysts sharing their own stories of stolen work. The revolution wasn't just mine anymore, it was ours. Thank you for listening to my story of corporate justice and sweet revenge. I'm curious, where are you listening to this tale of workplace vindication? Are you on your commute, perhaps plotting your own response to an office injustice? Or maybe you're at home, relating to the frustration of seeing others claim credit for your hard work. Please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts and your own experiences with workplace theft of ideas. Have you ever had a colleague steal your work? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories of standing up for what's rightfully yours.